everyone. Very welcome back to yet another episode of Captains Speaking. My name is Petter Hornfeld, and as always, I have together with me the very handsome.
Ben Watts, welcome everybody. How you doing? It's a stretch, Petter, but how are you?
I am awesome. I am in such a good mood.
I know why.
Yeah. No, it's like walking. It's a very strange feeling. For those of you listening who might be listening to this for the first time, I have just been renewing my Boeing 737 type rating after 26 months being away from the left seat. I decided that it was time make sure that I didn't lose it, and to see just how bad 26 months without flying actually makes you. So I did that 2 days ago on Wednesday. It's Friday today when we're recording this, and oof,
How's it feel to be a fully qualified 737 pilot again?
awesome, awesome. Um, it was a very strange. This whole thing has been very strange to me because, just to give you some background, I am full time working creating videos now for all of the channels that we do. So Mentor Pilot, Mentor Now, this Captain Speaking podcast, and loads of other things that are also going on in the background that you will soon learn more about. But it's a full time work. And the idea was that I took 3 years of leave of absence in order to just be able to focus on this project. And I thought, 3 years, it'll that's like a mountain of time, right? But the fact is that once you start working on something, it goes very quickly. You're busy, the family life goes on, things are happening in the background, life goes on in the background. And 3 years actually goes by pretty quickly. And the problem, though, is that when you do something completely different, even though this is related, I'm talking about aviation, I'm thinking about aviation, I'm reading manuals, I'm reading final reports all the time, you're not in it. You don't touch the controls,
Mm.
right? So I had basically no idea how this was going to go. I reached out to a friend of mine who works for this awesome ACMI airline called ETF Airlines. You should check it out. This is a really impressive small organization. But I've been in contact with him, and he basically asked, like, do you want me to help you to get back the rating? Because the rating, the LPC, the license proficiency check, is only valid for a year. So if you do the LPC, you get a year, and then once that year is over, you're not qualified to fly on it anymore. You don't lose the rating. The rating is still there, but you're not qualified to fly on the aircraft anymore. So generally speaking, when you're in the business, you do an LPC every single year. And if you're flying for an airline, you normally do 2 checks per year, one operator proficiency check and one combined operator and license proficiency check, to make sure that you never ever leave that currency. Now, on top of that, in order to fly, you also need to have 3 takeoffs and landings and within the last 90 days. And there's other additional requirements on it. But to get the rating, you need to do the LPC. And I hadn't done it for 26 months. Not been in a single check, nothing. You just leave it behind. So he asked me. They knew a training center, Sofia Training Center in Sofia, which is also a beautiful little training center, super nice personnel. And I flew over there just kind of just to see
Mm.
what would happen. And obviously, I prepared as much as I could. I don't have access to my company's manuals anymore, so I had to sort that out somehow, largely with help from you, Ben, to to get a little bit of tips and tricks from our virtual type rating. That helps a lot, actually. And then I was just reviewing. You know what kind of checks that will come. There's going to be an engine failure on takeoff. There's going to be an evacuation at some point. There's going to be single engine ILS flown down to a go around, single engine ILS flown to a landing, and there's going to be some other emergency things that's going to be checked. So I knew that because I'm a TRE myself. So I was reading to the quick reference handbook, reading to like the memory items that we need to know by heart, um, preparing for the checklist, just reading the checklist as well, because you get out of habit of doing that.
Mm.
You think you don't, but then you ask yourself, okay, so what exactly are you supposed to do? What are the items of this checklist? And you realize that you've forgotten them,
Yeah.
because memory retrieving is the hard bit.
Mm.
The the muscle memory, as in actually flying the beast, handling the aircraft, I think sits further into the memory.
Yeah.
But things like memory items, things like the theory around it, limitations of the aircraft, those kind of things that you have to keep it fresh. You have to keep working and reading it. So that's how I was preparing.
So how did you? Because obviously you're a TRE, you've spent thousands of hours in simulators, you've examined crews. How did you find the lead up to that? Were you kind of getting the pre-sim nerves? Did you kind of feel quite comfortable? How did it feel?
So normally I don't get very nervous for the simple reason that, just as you point out, I know what to expect, and also crucially I know like what not to do, you know. So I normally don't get that nervous. This time was different though, because not only was it not in the same organization that I normally do it. When you do it with with your own airline, for example, you know all the standard operating procedures, you know, the sim center where you're going to find everything. There's a lot of those background, the small little things, the small details that when you know them makes you comfortable.
Yeah.
Even things like how a training center smells
Mm.
will have a huge impact on how comfortable you feel with it. And I knew that that was not going to be the case now. I'm going to go to a completely new training center. I'm going to deal with new people. This airline, they go Boeing standard. My airline have very specific procedures for the 737. While this airline was using more or less what Boeing teaches, like this is the way you're supposed to fly the 737, and it's very different.
Yeah.
I had told them that, listen, I'm going to fly this aircraft as I flew it in my previous, or in my
Oh yeah.
actually current company, because if I try to do things differently, it's not going to be a good day.
There's no way.
Yeah, and this was not an OPC. That's worth pointing out as
Yeah.
well. If this would have been an OPC for this airline, I would have had
Mm.
to do the SOPs in
Yep.
their way. But this was a license proficiency check, so then it's just about my competence.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no. To answer your question, yeah, I was a bit nervous
Mm.
because no matter how you want to prepare, I knew that there's no way that I can read myself up to the level that I would have normally had if I had continued flying online. Because when you fly online, you come up against problems, you take up the manuals, you read through that particular part of the manual, flight time limitations, technical systems, stuff like that. But if I were to do this, I would have had to read through the entire manual a couple of times, and
Mm.
I don't have time to
No.
do that, right? So I didn't know, like, what theoretical level am I at.
Mm. And there's no way of knowing until you jump in the sim, is there? There's no. You've just got to do it.
Yeah.
That's it.
So I wasn't that nervous though. I kind of like I was more curious because there's another level to this as well, and that is when you do an LPC and an OPC generally in an airline, you know that your livelihood is a little bit on stake. If you fail, you're going to be taken off the roster. You're not going to be making the same amount of money as you did before until you have been retrained and then done a new check and then been allowed back out again, which is the way that it should be. But that obviously was not a problem for me because my livelihood is now what I'm doing through the channels. So if I would fail, that would be extremely embarrassing and I would feel horrible. But it wouldn't risk my family's paying the bills, basically.
I've had nowhere near the length of break away from flying that you've had. I think the longest I've ever had was 9 months. But it's that the core flying, as you said, I think is when you've been doing it for so long, it is ingrained into you. And it was the smaller bits, it was the smaller elements of it that I found took time to come back. The kind of the like you the w- you know the smaller SOPs,
Mm.
particularly when you get online and you start flying on the line and you're doing turnarounds and you think, oh yeah, I've got to, this happens now and now this happens and that's the bit of time, or that's the area that I found personally took a bit of time to come back to get that capacity back.
Yeah, there's no question, and I know that that's going to be a huge hurdle. But this was my
Mm,
first hurdle, so I
mm,
I I met up with the TRE, and we had a discussion. I had a pre-flight briefing. We go through all of the limitations and everything that you're supposed to go before a check and ask questions, and you know the standard things that you do before a check. I recognize everything, and then into the sim. And this is a Boeing 737-800. So it wasn't a Max, it was an 800, which is what I've flown the vast majority of my time on. So, you get into the sim and you just have that simulator smell. hit you. And for me, for a lot of pilots out there, that is, combined with dread. It's combined with
Yeah.
stress. It's combined with discomfort. But for me, it's like coming home. It's like I know this. I did this. Is this? I know how this moves, how it creaks, how it everything. So I just felt more comfortable.
Mm.
When I got into the cockpit and I sat down in the left seat, and you get your headset on and you put your chair into the position, it was like I had never left. Literally, I was astounded. It was almost a surreal experience because, generally speaking, you would think that, yeah, at least you'd feel a little bit if you haven't been doing something that's really advanced for a long time. Generally speaking, you kind of feel a bit uncomfortable, at least. But no, no, no. This was just sitting down, checking checking the sun visor, oxygen, switching on the ACP panel, up, put the minima on the panel, making sure you have terrain set on the navigation display, into the FMC, fill it up, and like, right, go. And that to me was like, that was a revelation, because that really drives home how much experience actually does for you, like how important that muscle memory is in certain situations. And this is why Boeing are using these scan flow maneuvers that you hammer in during your type rating, that you're supposed to do things in a specific order, which is what we're talking about in our virtual 737 course as well. You follow that same, and you do it over and over and over again. And the benefit of that is that even under stress, you remember it. And if you have, like we have been flying for over 20 years, it comes back to you like
Mm.
that.
But it's interesting from a psychological perspective because you often hear people talking about skill fade,
Mm.
particularly in jobs that require very fine motor skills or an ability to work very very accurately. And it's something that you and I have both found that from breaks away, that's still there. I mean, when you flew an approach or you had a single engine out, I know I've spoken to you before. You nailed it. You nailed it, despite not touching an aircraft for 26 months. So it'd be interesting to look into, to find out how that skill fade works. Where does that kick in? How does it kick in?
I think you were right on the point that that skill fade would kick in when I'd have to do a normal day. Like, if I would, because flying a simulator, you have very specific conditions, and you're supposed to do very specific things. And like handling an engine failure after takeoff, for example, like, okay, find it. You feel how the nose is moving. You put the correct amount of pressure in, and also, a simulator is a simulator. It is a computer after all. So once you know how to do it, you kind of know how to do it, right? I think people who is playing a lot of Super Mario Bros. That are all Nintendo computer game, even if they're away for 30 years, if they sit down, they will still remember like the cheat codes and how
Yeah,
long
yeah.
you have to and it's similar, right? When it comes to those things, I think that if I would go back to my airline today, and they would say, okay, now you're going to do line training. Here are all of these new applications that you need to deal with
Mhm.
in order to find your V speeds and do this and this and that, and you're going to deal with the passengers at the same time. That's where the skill fade would come in. That's where I can already feel my headache pound when I have to deal with that, and doing it
Yeah.
in the same time. Doing a 25-minute turnaround, for example, is that requires you to be on the ball, knowing exactly what to do at every given second, and not
Mm,
hesitating at all. And that's where the skill fade will come in, I am sure.
mm.
Right. So before we continue with the rest of the podcast, I just want to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of this episode, which is Mood Monsters. Now, man, do you know what Mood Monsters is?
Yeah, I've heard of them actually. Yeah, but yeah, elaborate. Tell me more.
Yeah, anyone who's been following me in my different channels knows that I am really passionate about mental health. And in my case, I speak a lot about mental health within aviation, but you know, people who have had teenagers in their household know that probably that kind of discussion should come at a much earlier stage than when they're active flying pilots. So Mood Monsters got into contact with me, asked if I wanted to help kind of bring the word out about them, and they sent me this game, and I actually played it together with my 13 and 15-year-old and my wife. So what Mood Monsters have actually created is this card game that can be played in a multitude of different ways. It's been created by a psychiatrist that's working with adolescents and children for the last 2 decades. So they've had loads and loads of exposure to it. And what they've found is that emotional literacy is super important.
Mm.
So, emotional literacy means that you can actually name the emotions that you're feeling and also what those emotions are, if they're positive, negative, or the way that he is framing it, if they're high energy or low energy. So we got this card game, which is beautiful, by the way. I love the colors on it. And then the way that we chose to play it, you can do it in many different ways. But the way that we choose to do it is we pull the card, and then we had to do some charades about the motion that was written on the card. So I had to play out, for example, being,
Peaceful.
you have the easy ones, sad, angry, and so on. But these were
Calm.
more
Explain the time.
specific ones. They were harder to actually play out.
Yeah.
And then my kids had to guess what it was, and the ones who guessed the right had to explain when they felt like that.
A time when I felt calm. Probably right after I finished all my exams.
Okay.
So it gives an opportunity to talk about emotions that you very rarely get when you're talking to your teenagers and your kids.
Yeah, I can see where that value would be because normally you'd never, being a parent of teenagers myself, it's a topic that's difficult to kind of broach.
Yeah.
And this is putting you into the right place to do that.
And this made it really, really easy and very natural, and we could, that gives us as parents a possibility as well to talk, like, when did I feel sad? Under what circumstances did that happen? And so on. So I actually enjoyed playing it. I thought it was a really, really fun game. The kids, I don't think they understood that this was actually kind of a lesson in emotional literacy, which is the point.
Yeah.
So if you guys are watching this and you think that you want to try to do this with your family, which I highly recommend to everyone, well, then you can go to moodmonsters.com and enter the code mentor10 to get a 10% discount when you're buying it. So that's moodmonsters.com. And they are doing a lot of other stuff around mental health that they're about to come out with as well. So there's some news coming up. So go and check out the website in any case. Thanks a lot, Mood Monsters, for sponsoring this episode. Now, let's continue.
Yeah, and I think from one an interesting element from me from the skill fade perspective after my 9 months away was my sim was I was like you said, I kind of got back into that. I felt very comfortable, got straight back into that, and they do chuck you back in at the deep end, don't they? Like like you've experienced. 26 months away, straight into single engines, complex approaches. There's no kind of gentle warm up. And I got on the line, started doing line training just for a couple of sectors to kind of get myself back current on the line again. First landings, takeoffs, they were great. Thinking, oh, awesome. And then you start to get some more capacity back. So on those first approaches, you're so dialed in, laser focused, because you're using everything you've got to make it work. And then you start getting that capacity back and you're thinking about, okay, if we go around, what's the weather like on the go around or whatever? And I found that about 2 or 3 days later, things weren't quite so good. Quite interestingly, it kind of took a bit of a dip.
Yeah.
I noticed my approach wasn't quite so tidy, or my landings weren't quite as I wanted them before it started going back up again. And that was an interesting experience for me.
Yeah, and it probably has to do with how much you're asking from yourself. Because you when you get back in, you will have an experience, like, you will expect that you're probably not going to do very well. Your
True.
expectations on yourself is probably not that high, and you're using maybe your line training captain that you're doing your training with a little bit more, and using his or her capacity. But then as you're starting to take on more and more onto yourself, that's where you start noticing that actually, oh, there is a lack here, and I am absolutely sure that that would come. I would be very reluctant to do flights without. I would never go in without a line training captain, for example, and I would need quite a few sectors together with another trainer before I would feel comfortable to sit in the left seat by myself after this. But having said that, actually flying the thing, it was awesome. It was awesome. It's like you sit there and you just like this huge smile comes on you when you're sitting there, and you're handling it, and they fail engines and you deal with that, and we did a visual approach, like a takeoff just straight into a visual approach without flight directors and stuff, and you just sit there and you get to fly the thing, and you get down and it's just nailing thing, like, it's we had to do also a route sector, because obviously,
Yeah.
when you do an LPC and you haven't been flying for a while, you need to do route sector in the sim. So we did that,
Yeah.
and that was a whole flight, up to flight level
Mm.
240 or whatever, between Frankfurt and Brussels,
Okay.
uh, and with some turns and some air work in order to get myself back in it again. But you very quickly, like, these things, the operational things as well, comes back. And you see it cloud,
Mm.
and you like immediately look down. Okay, it's 10 degrees. Engine and the ice on. Like it. No, I was super impressed with both the professionalism of these people that I flew with. Like, the check was greatly done.
Mm.
The simulator center was beautiful, but I was also really happily surprised of how relatively easy it was to get back into it.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice. So are you going to keep it current? That's the question now.
we'll see. I mean, the idea is obviously to do that. I want to get back to do a bit of flying. I haven't done my last flight yet. That would be super sad. I'm only 44 years old. So I want to keep it current. It's a little bit complex, because finding an airline that's interested in me flying just a little bit when I feel like it, when it suits me, that, generally speaking, does not exist. Because once you're a pilot, and you're expected to be able to deliver against a schedule. So I don't have great hopes in achieving that, but we'll see. I What I've learned from life so far is that it throws interesting curveballs. And when you're not in a desperate need to get something, you can kind of not pick and choose, but you can look at, okay, this actually looks interesting. I'm going to apply for that
Mm.
and go down that route, which,
Yeah. It's great to be able to cherry pick what you want. Happy days.
yeah.
You're winning.
And I have some really cool ideas about what I would like to do involving my patrons as well, but I'm not going to say anything about that. There's further reasons behind me getting this rating up and
Yeah.
running again.
It's a very cool idea. And I'd like to be involved with that as well. But
Oh,
we'll hold that for another day.
we should see what we can do.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, we'll not say anything yet. But
Yeah.
there are plans in the making.
Cool. Well, this is episode 20, isn't it?
Yep.
This is episode 20 of the podcast. And it's been a fun journey so far. And it's growing and it's great. And we've had so many questions. And we often go off onto great topics. But at the end of each session, we have such a little time left to do a question.
Yep.
So I thought for this one, what do you think about maybe diving in and doing a few questions and actually, they might turn into mini topics themselves?
Absolutely, I'd love to. I mean, we are here for the audience, so
Yeah,
answering
yeah.
the audience questions kind of should be part of that.
Absolutely. And the questions are amazing. When I go through the comments and the podcast, and we both do go through the comments, there's some amazing input from personal stories that where what we've said has resonated with certain people, to their own experiences of topics that we've covered. There's such a great wealth of experience in the comments. So have you got anything there, Peter, that you want to dive into first?
Okay, so I'm going back a little bit, because obviously we've been doing this for a while now. Let's see. Okay, so hey, captains. Question: how much of the theory behind aviation do you feel is relevant on a day-to-day basis? For example, the ATPL theory is massive and a lot is covered. I understand what you'd need to know it, but in your opinions, how much of that do you realistically use, fall back on during the day-to-day operations? Thanks, from Chris.
That's a good question, and one I get asked a lot. And I know I questioned this during my ATPLs. I remember one of my least favorite topics or subjects was operational procedures. And it's where you're just kind of learning the law. It's a bit like air law. And I remember, and the air law is another one as well. I used to call it air bore. And you're learning, I remember the most ridiculous thing I had to learn, because it was a question that we thought could come up, was what was the dimensions of the H on a helipad?
Yeah.
In other words, how wide did the two sticks need to be? How the crossbar? And I thought, what an absolutely ridiculous bit of brain I need to give to that information.
Yep.
So there's elements of it that are completely useless, but the problem is they don't know what area of aviation you're going to go into, so they have to cover kind of everything in there. And the problem with knowledge is that you need a foundation for the higher stuff to be built upon.
Yep.
So you need an understanding of how things work, even though we're not applying it every day, in order to understand the equipment and what we're doing every day.
Yeah. So there's some quick answers to this. Meteorology, all of it. More or less all
Mm,
of it. You're going to hit it one day or another. There's going to be some kind of meteorologic phenomenon that you are going to need to understand. So meteorology, I wouldn't miss a part of what I learned. I thought it was super interesting. Hard, super interesting. Aerodynamics, same thing there, right? So the aircraft general, also to a large extent very needed. That's probably, I mean, you really need to understand the systems around you. I mean, I've showed that when I do my mentor pilot episodes, it's very often technical systems that needs to be explained, and the reason I need to explain them was because they were involved in causing the accident. And very often there's, misunderstandings between the crew or the maintenance personnel that leads to a fault not being recognized for how dangerous it is, and hence, the chain starts moving forward. So those are the kind of things. Now when it comes to stuff that is maybe less so interesting, you've touched on some of them. Air law, ops procedures, they are important for a different reason. Like you will definitely come across things like, flight time limitations in there, which is on a day-to-day basis used all the time. But then you'll come across those kind of things, which I feel they've just put in there in order to kind of make it a little bit harder than it needs to be, to provide a divider, basically like making sure that you need to be able to learn all of this, otherwise you shouldn't be in this occupation. So less about what it is and more about how you can actually absorb the knowledge. That's very, very clear when you do the question banks, because the questions can be absolutely ridiculous, have no connection to what you're going to do in real life. That's all about just verifying that you're able to cram in not only knowledge but also cram in how questions are made.
mm.
So
Yeah.
it's always the longest answer or C. If you don't know, it's
See,
yeah.
move on.
If you don't know the answer, it's the longest answer or C.
Yeah.
There we go.
The one that says all of the above.
Yeah, never. It's never, never or always.
Yeah.
Those two things, they're always the wrong ones. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, but
Yeah, so
like you need to. A vast majority is stuff that you're going to come across sometimes. Some of it is stuff that you're going to come across all the time.
mm.
So and you don't know when you're studying. You don't know which is which.
You don't. You have no idea. And also, remember, this is a precursor. The vast majority of people that are going through these exams are going to go on to become airline pilots, and they're going to have to do a type rating. So it's a way also of kind of ensuring that you have the ability to absorb that kind of knowledge that you're going to have to absorb later on in a type rating. It's kind of like a filter, if you like. So, yeah, yes, it's a lot of it. You might think, oh, this is a waste of time. You just got to suck it up. You got to learn it, dump it on the exam, move
I
on.
mean, like I've been kind of laughing about. You remember how you did the point of no return and point of equal time
Yeah.
on navigation? We're sitting there, and did you do those things where you kind of made this like graphical representation of it?
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah, yeah,
one of the
yeah.
legs was always super long and needed
That's
almost
right.
2 pages in order to like you're sitting there
Yeah.
and you're sitting there calculating these things, and like, when am I ever going to touch this? But then you do your qualification for flying on oceanic routes, and you realize that actually there is a point of no return here, and
Mm.
there is a point of equal time. So this is where it was for. I haven't
Mm.
touched it in 20 years, but now
Yeah.
I suddenly need to.
Yeah.
Not that I was
So
sitting there and writing those pod. I think it was the point of equal distance, or that
I
was
can't
the point.
remember. I can't remember. But we used to have a mass. I remember that I used to, at one point during the nav exam, which is a big exam, I actually had a moment, when you have one of those moments, you're sitting there in the exam and you kind of just have a moment to look up and you can see like 30 other guys around you, girls, and they're all doing their exam. And just chuckling to myself because we had these like giant paper maps that we'd all have to unfold, and we're kind of struggling with them on our desks, and we had protractors and rulers, and you can see everyone rustling. And I thought, God, yeah, we're never going to do this in real life.
No.
But it was, it was funny
Yeah,
to look
and
at.
it was part of that. I remember there was like, you're flying on a DC-3 over Iceland. The magnetic, what was it? There was questions about, because there's a difference between the
It's,
magnetic north and the
yeah,
true north, obviously. So your
grid north,
magnetic
and yeah.
deviation is 2 degrees, and you're on this heading and this speed.
Mm.
How is this going to affect you? And oh, You
Yeah.
really think that this is this, the day that I have to sit in my DC3 and calculate this, this is gonna be a
I've got
problem.
bigger problems.
But it was
Yeah.
also like I remember that back when I did it, we still had to look at things like Laurent C
Yeah.
navigation and Decca navigation
Mm,
systems that they had discontinued already when we
mm,
were doing it,
mm.
and we still had to like hyperbole navigation it was called. I think that they have that the theory is a little bit more up to date now, but
I would hope so.
I remember that the theory was definitely slightly outdated.
Yeah. I remember the problem that we had when I joined, when I did my ground school, we just moved from the UK CAA exams to the UK being integrated into Europe. And we had the JAA, JAR exams. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
40 answer. And we were the first cohort to go through this. So we had no question banks. All of the question banks, which for those of you that don't know, is a list of every question for every topic that's ever been in an exam. So people used to just teach the topics towards the questions that they knew you would get.
mm,
And then at the end of each topic, before the exams, when you've covered everything, you would just smash out these question banks. Just go, and you're probably going to see every question in your exam. They emptied this question bank, and we now had to learn absolutely every single topic in that subject. And we had no idea what was going to be asked. So the I remember sitting down for day one for our ground school, and the ground school examiners saying to us, "Look, we're going to kind of apologize up front here and in advance because we are going to have to teach you every single element of this topic because we have no idea. We haven't had any JAR exams come through yet. So we had to learn everything, and it was a hell of a task. But it was, the plus side is you had to learn everything. That was the plus side. The downside was it was blooming hard work.
yeah. I actually had a quite interesting experience because I did all of my ATPL theory and my CPL before JAR came in. So it was on the national, what's called national regulations then. So every country had their own, and then you were still allowed to fly, obviously in Europe and stuff. But then JAR came in as a joint aviation requirements. I can't remember exactly what it stood for.
Yeah, it was a Joint Aviation Authority, and then you had the Joint Aviation Regulations. I think it
Regulation,
was.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that came in when I was doing my military service. And then
Mm.
part of the government sponsored program that I came through, it was put after. So you did part of it as in the Swedish gymnasium, which is like the junior college, and then you did your military service, and then you could apply for the second part, which included the multi-engine and the MCC, and then some time building as well. Now, while I was doing my military service, JAR came in, which meant that the school had to change that. So, and they recognized that it was now too much. There was too much theory to do on the first bit of the training, so they moved it over to the secondary bit. But that also meant that when I applied and got into the second part, they said, "All right, so part of this is that you need to do the ATPL theory," and I was like, I have I've done that, and I have a license that says so." And they're like, "Yeah, no, but it's your now, so you're gonna have to redo everything and do all of the 13 exams again." And I this is one of the first times in my career that I stood my ground and I flat out refused. I said, "Listen, no, no way. I have sat through this. I've done these exams, 13 of them. I have it in my license." And it should also be said here that the way that this was supposed to happen was that people who had the previous licenses, the national ones, they could go and do a conversion course, which was a 1 day course that showed the differences between FCL, the JAR FCL, and the old ones. And when you had that, you would automatically just get your license moved over to JAR. So I came to them and I said, "Listen, this is what the authorities are telling us to do. I'm going down to Norrköping. I am doing a 1 day course, and I'm getting my JAR license, or I get to do 13, study for a year and do 13 exams to get the same thing. I refuse to do this." And there was a huge hullabaloo with the school because obviously the school was being paid for a certain amount of hours that needs to be done. So I understand their side of it as well.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening was because of this, me and another, I think we were 5, 6 people that actually had this problem. We ended up not doing it. right? So we were the slackers of the group. Everyone was sitting in there doing it, and we were chilling outside. But that also meant that when there was an opening at an MCC, we could do our multi-engine training before everyone else,
Okay.
because now there was no one who could do that, but we could. So
Mm.
we did the multi-engine before everyone else. And then there was an MCC course that opened up early as well for some reason. And we said, well, we can jump onto that. And because we had done that, I had my multi-engine CPL IRME done and the MCC course by the summer. And all of a sudden, this airline needed pilots. And a friend of mine had gotten into this airline, and they reached out. The airline was basically asking, do you know any more pilots that are ready that can come and do screenings? And my friend, like, yeah, I have a few guys. So they called me and a few of the others, and I got in, which meant that as my classmates, who were now, some of them were actually redoing their theory, just being
Oh.
good boys, doing what the school had told them, they now saw us going over and starting to fly the 737 while they hadn't started their multi-engine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a it's one of those things that's defining in your life. Like,
Yeah.
if I would have just bent over and done what they told me, I would not have been able to take that call. I wouldn't have been able to go
Mm.
for the screening. I wouldn't have got my first job, which was the airline that I then continued working for 20 years.
Yeah. Well, it pays to stand your ground. I mean, it's the irony at the moment now, though, is that we've in the UK anyway, because of Brexit, the CAA has now come back into full force. So there's pilots now that have an EASA license, which means they can fly anywhere in Europe. But if they want to fly UK registered aircraft now, they've now got to redo all of those 13 exams again.
That's the most horrible, horrifying, stupid thing that, like, I was not a fan of Brexit. Like, there
Mm,
was 2016 was a very bad year. And
mm,
Brexit was the first bad thing that happened that year. And I remember sitting there and seeing that it happened. As like, there is no way that this is going to have any positive ramifications whatsoever for anyone, from my point of view.
no.
And largely, I think I was right. I don't think anyone thinks that that was a good idea anymore.
I'm yet to meet anyone, to be honest. It's been nothing but a pain for us here in the UK, from my perspective, and this is just one element of it in aviation. I was lucky in that I had grandfather rights. So if we applied for our UK license before a certain date, we would get our UK license because you can't have two of the same licenses. So when the UK was part of EASA, the European Aviation, we could only have one ATPL, airline transport pilot's license. So we had to have an Irish one or a UK one. You can only have one. Whereas now that the UK is separate, you can have two. You can have a UK one and you can have a European one. So I got my UK one back. So now I've got both licenses. But for those that missed the deadline or for those coming through the system now, they've got to redo the whole thing
Yeah.
again. And I'm just thinking it's so expensive and it's such a waste of time.
Yeah, and this is actually similar to if you have an FAA license and you want to come to Europe. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
similar now, but it's so unnecessary because we had, like,
Mm.
these, like, the UK pilots and the UK flight schools, which are also heavily impacted by this. They were at the same level as everyone else in Europe, and we were following the same rules, and everyone was super happy with this. So this is a manufactured problem. This is someone who's come up with the idea. Let's be different. Let's now make it hard for everyone involved, and this is all the airlines as well that need to rewrite their manuals and need to follow now two authorities. If you have an airline that's operating out of, with UK based or registered aircraft, and also European ones, it's if you are a UK citizen and you have a UK CAA license and you now want to work in Europe, it's a problem. Like, now you need work visas and stuff, which was never a problem before. So on the level of really unnecessary problems, this ranks pretty high on my list.
Yeah, it's up there. Yeah, massively up there. So anyway, that was a good
That
question.
was and that was a long answer.
Yeah.
This is why when we're probably gonna have to do a few of these because
Yeah.
we end up just spending a lot of time to answer them. But the answer to your question in the very short version is that, yeah, you will need your theory, maybe not all of it, but you don't know which part.
Study hard.
Study hard.
Anything else you got there?
So, hi team. How common is it for a pilot to be fully type rated on both a Boeing 737 and then go and get a full type rating on an Airbus A320? And if this isn't common, would there be any advantage for a very popular and quite handsome YouTube creator that has a need to understand fully both equipment types to go and get an Airbus A320 type rating to help with the video content creation? Would that be a justification for the cost and time? Cheers, Alex Garner from Australia. I don't know such a person, but I would imagine that yeah, if it was me, who's not that quite handsome, I have actually thought about doing an Airbus type rating on my own, just for this reason. Because I love aviation, and because in order to explain aircraft systems at the moment, I kind of think that I understand it, but I think you actually have to fly it in order to be really fully immersed in the explanations.
Yeah. Oh, I've neither of us have gone on and flown Airbus. And from I've a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, a neighbor. He was Boeing his whole career, very similar to us actually. He's been flying for 20 years on Boeing, and he went and had to go and get rated on the A320, 321. And speaking to him, he really does not like it. Now, this is not to offend any Airbus people out there. I think it's just a completely different mindset. Boeing and Airbus look at it from very different angles. And when it's been ingrained to look at flying and fly an aircraft in one particular way, and then you do it in a completely different way, it just scrambles your brain. And the longer you've been flying the previous aircraft type, the harder I think it is to adapt.
Yeah, and it's I have a friend who went from 737, then on to Boeing 777, and then back to the 737, and then to Airbus. And Airbus is on the Airbus 319, 320, 321 at the moment. And he thought it was hard, but he also said that the Airbus is on a day-to-day operation is much easier. Um, the problem is when things start to go wrong in the Airbus, because then it's harder to understand it. It's more integrated, more computer systems involved. While the Boeing is a 1970s, 1960s aircraft, so it's pretty cumbersome to work on a day-to-day basis. When they built that, they didn't think of ergonomics and things like that. But when things goes wrong, it's like an old Volvo. It makes sense. Okay, we're starting to go low on fuel in one tank. We're gonna get an overheat in the hydraulic pump soon. Like it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's cooled by the fuel. Yeah, that's gonna be a problem soon. And there it is, and you understand it.
Yeah.
So I would still like to do the type rating on the Airbus A320. Not that I want to fly it or think that I will, but because I would think it's interesting.
Yeah, I'd be fascinated to try. I've been fortunate enough to sit and to go and visit flight decks of different Airbus, and they're a completely different world. You look at it, someone that's been flying airliners for 20 years, you look at it and go, I wouldn't even know where to begin in here. And I was chatting
You
to
know what we should do? We should get ourselves in an Airbus cockpit. We should what they should do is that we
that would be
ask the
fun.
TRE to put it up on cruise altitude, put you and me in the seat, and then like, okay, boys, try to get this thing down in one piece.
That would be
That
fun.
would be fun. We would.
So
We would get it down. But
we would get
we
it
would get
down.
it
I'm
down.
pretty
It
sure we'd get
wouldn't
it
like
down.
it would probably be really good content for Airbus crews to
Oh, they'd
see.
laugh. They'd laugh. Absolutely. I think we've got a better chance of getting it down and landing it than we do of starting it up.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
If, if you put us in a cold, dark Airbus and said, right, start this thing up,
But isn't that just press the start button?
yeah, on.
Yeah. I mean, the way I understand it, it's just an Airbus cockpit is basically only needs one pilot and a dog,
Yeah.
and the pilot, the dog is just there to make sure that the pilot doesn't touch anything.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But
had the same.
no, you know, aim into that. I think that if the most fun would probably be for a professional to see a Boeing crew come in completely unprepared and then just try to get the thing set up for a departure and go.
It would be comedy gold for them, no doubt. No doubt. Well, I remember speaking to an A380 captain, and the A380's got, I don't know, 4,000 different fuel pumps, for example. It's got the overhead panel, it's got fuel pumps everywhere. And I looked up and I sort of said to him, are you, that looks complicated. And he went, I have no idea. I just turn them all on. And then it just looks after it. It moves fuel to get the center of gravity right
But
for takeoff. And
yeah, and yeah, the 380 is true. I have a friend who flies it as well, and he like
yeah,
the problem comes when you start to have issues.
yeah,
Like
you
when
got
everything
to,
works, it's just like I said, it's black cockpit. So you turn it all on, everything's fine. And but then if you start to have an issue, then it starts to be problems with where the fuel is and how much fuel you have available, because that tank is now not available, and there's a lot of those kind of things, which goes back to the point I said before. When things goes wrong in the Airbus, it becomes more of an issue. But yeah, great question. Do you have any questions?
I've got one here. Where was it now? It was saying, let me just bring it up here. So it was from Jazz Blue here. What was a career low outside of training that you had to get through and are willing to share? What did you learn from that experience?
Career low.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm just trying to think myself. It came through there, and I'm just thinking
I
a
mean,
career low.
we had a situation. I was a trainer at the time, and in my airline, you did an SFI course, and then the idea was that you worked as a synthetic flight instructor for a year, and then you'd go back onto line and basically work towards your command. Right, I was first officer at the time. So, and I remember we managed to work out a deal where we opened up a training academy in Stockholm. And being Swedish, that was a big deal, and I
Mm,
got to go there, and I was working out of Stockholm as an instructor, and that was after the year. So I did a full year in our training academy that we should be, and then I extended it, and I continued to be an instructor for longer in Stockholm. And we had a really, really sweet kind of deal going on where I was flying 2 weeks, I was instructing 2 weeks. SAS Flight Academy, where we had the simulator, was beautiful, super nice people, everything was good. But then something happened. I think they needed to get new SFIs in there or whatever. And we weren't allowed to continue with that anymore. And I remember that as being
mm,
devastating, because it was like I loved the sim training, and
mm.
it wasn't available anymore. And I remember that as being like, oh, tough.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah,
That sucks. Um, I'm just trying to think of some, probably the low for me that I can think of. It's hard to find, which is makes us feel very fortunate.
yeah,
But goes right back to the beginning of my career. As a lot of you will know, I was sponsored by KLM UK, and part of that deal was once they trained us as pilots, they would put us in a flight school to be flight instructors for 2 years to build up 1,000 hours of experience before we joined the airline. So I was working there for 2 years as a flying instructor, loving it, and it had this kind of this gold at the end of the tunnel, knowing that at the end of the 2 years, I'm going to be doing a type rating, joining the airline. Had a lot to look forward to. And then September the 11th happened, about two-thirds of the way through my 2 years. And we were all thinking, I remember sitting in the flight school because I think there was me and three others that were on this sponsorship scheme. And we're sitting there, I wonder how this is going to affect us. How's this going to affect the industry? We had no idea. We knew it wasn't going to be good. Anyway, obviously, what happened. And as the months went by, we could see things getting really bad in aviation. And we ended up getting a letter from KLM. And KLM said, look, basically, we don't know whether KLM UK is going to last. We can't offer you a job at the end of this. We can't honor your sponsorship. However, your training bond is gone. So you basically they've given us all our training for free. We didn't have to kind of have a reduced salary for 5-10 years. But best of luck for the future.
yeah.
And suddenly you suddenly felt like you're out in the cold. You're like everything you geared up to and been aiming for 2 years had just been pulled away.
Hmm.
And you're now facing an industry where there was very little recruitment, if any, going on. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how are we going to, what's going to happen here? My 2 years as an instructor was coming up. So yeah, it was pretty bad. I mean, I was very lucky afterwards. I carried on instructing for a while. Industry started to pick up, and the chief pilot of KLM UK worked for their kind of leisure airline Buzz, which was their kind of bucket and spade. And I was chucking out CVs everywhere, and he recognised my name after about a year after that, and he pulled me in, and I got into their this Buzz, which was their kind of bucket and spade airline before it got taken over by my current airline. So I was very lucky in the end. But there was that moment where you look at it and go, "How's this going to work?"
Yeah. No, yeah,
Yeah.
that 9/11, I remember I was sitting in the flight school, like I was doing my multi-engine
Mm,
training at that point, and I was, we recognized same as you as this is not good.
mm,
This is going to have an impact. Now, luckily enough, one of the very few airlines that actually continued to recruit after 2001 was the airline that I got in.
yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
lucky. I didn't have to, but a lot of my course mates didn't get a job for 5-6 years after that.
No.
And then of
No.
course we have COVID. Like COVID was a different thing. It's completely like that. It just ravaged the industry for a full year. Fortunately, I was working with Adam's doing now, which then everyone was home watching YouTube. So that was a positive thing for the YouTube part of it. But obviously, all of my colleagues, it was horrifying. Like we would talking people that were taking their kids out of school, selling their cars, selling their houses in order to be able to pay bills. So very, very hard. Aviation has a tendency to be at the kind of the front line of anything that happens in the wider economy. So 2001 was bad for a lot of different people, and aviation was hit hard. After 2008, there was another downturn because of the Great Recession, and then COVID hit aviation, and all hospitality business is really super super hard. So it's one of those things. This is one of the reasons I tell people that's going into this business. You know, people ask, "Do you, do I should I go to to get a university degree?" And I always tell them, like, listen, think about it. A lot of airlines actually do require you to have a university degree in order for you to apply. But I would definitely think about it as a secondary way out. Have it as a backup, just like you need alternate fuel when you go to a destination. You don't want to end up at your alternate, but you might. This is the same here. Get yourself on the degree of something that you would love to do in case pilot doesn't work out, and then get that degree so that you have something to fall back on.
Yeah, I've noticed a lot of pilots have actually gone off and done like open degrees where they can do it while they're working, like open university degrees. Because COVID taught us all a lesson. We all had our eggs in one basket. We think you're fairly safe in a big airline, and something like that happens, and you realize you're not.
Yeah,
So I noticed a lot of people have diversified into different things. For me, it's airline pilot performance. A lot of people, it's getting degrees. Other things, it's getting side jobs. But there's just it's taught us all a lesson for sure.
for sure. So, should we finish off with a pretty quick question here?
Yeah,
I see
you've
I
got a
see
good
one's
one.
coming up here. Is there any difference between cargo and passenger pilots?
Not really. No, I mean, what your qualifications are the same. You're flying from A to B, from one airport to another. The difference really is the lifestyle and the way you're doing it, isn't it?
Yeah, no, for sure. So you and me, we could go and be cargo pilots tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'd have to do an operator conversion course to the new airline. We'd have to learn all of their procedures and what they do and all of their systems. But flying the aircraft is the same. So
And a lot of airlines do both. If you look at places like Qatar, for example, I think Emirates are the same. If
Emirates,
you're a 777 pilot in Qatar, you'll be flying passengers one day and freight the next.
yeah.
It's just, yeah,
No. So the
not a
answer
huge
is no.
difference.
There's no. But the lifestyle can be very different. There could be a lot of night flights and things in cargo.
Mm.
But then on the other hand, if you're flying long haul, it doesn't really matter that much, I guess, because you're flying over time zones anyway. But um, yeah, I've never tried cargo flying. Have you?
No, I've never tried it. No, I mean sometimes fly to Cologne, which is a big, huge cargo hub in Germany, and it's late at night when our flight gets there. And most airports are kind of winding down. Night curfews are coming in, so everything's kind of winding down. But because it's a huge cargo airport, I mean, it's a great place to plane spot, full of 747-8s and 777s, and it's like, and you get there at midnight. It's like Piccadilly Circus. It's lit up and it's busy. It's chaos, and it's like midnight
Yeah.
because all the cargo guys are getting ready to go to work.
Yeah.
It's you got to be nocturnal if you're flying cargo.
Yeah. And I think that's about it. Well, there's loads of questions, and I want you to continue to
Mm.
send in your questions because we're going to do
Yeah,
more of these. And every episode, we will answer at least one of these questions, possibly two. But as you can see, we
yeah.
take our time to answer them. We're not going through a huge mass of them. But I
No.
love seeing the questions. Keep sending them
Yeah.
in. The email address, do you remember it?
Your captains at mentalpilot.com.
So captains plural,
Correct.
captains at
Plural.
mentorpilot.com. You send it to that, it will go to Spiros. That will then write them down to us and send them to us so that we can, because we haven't seen these questions before we get them.
No, we get them pinged in, and we do look in the comments. So if you want to put them in there, if you're watching this on YouTube, we check.
Absolutely. And if you're not watching, well, if you are watching this on YouTube, but you want to take it out when you're out walking or in your car, whatever, we are available on all podcast platforms out there. So just look for Captain Speaking and you'll find us there. And I think on that note, we'll finish this episode off. It's been great talking to you as always, Ben.
Absolutely. Yeah. Rest up well. I'm sure you're absolutely knackered. Now you're a qualified pilot again.
Yeah,
But
I recognize that fatigue came in immediately. So no, I'm gonna finish editing a Mentor Pilot episode once we're done with this, and then I'm gonna drive down to Spain because it's Halloween, and my kids wants to be with their friends in Spain for that.
nice. Nice. Well, drive safe. Take care, everybody. And we'll see you next
See you
week.
next week.